In June 2006, Queen Elizabeth II celebrated her official 80th birthday with the annual Trooping the Colour. Her real birthday falls in April, but she prefers the summer weather for this military display of pomp and pageantry. For over half a century, the formula has hardly changed. In those years, the Queen has aged gracefully, but she's remained essentially the same dedicated monarch. Her reign has witnessed an era of great social change in Britain, the Commonwealth, and in her own family. St. Paul's Cathedral was the setting for a service of thanksgiving to mark her official birthday. It was attended by the Queen and the royal family. The nation's gratitude was expressed by the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Birthdays are among the most vivid reminders we can have of our common humanity and our common call to journey through time with each other. So today, Your Majesty, we give thanks with you simply for the gifts of life and experience.
The Prime Minister, Tony Blair, praised the Queen as a remarkable source of constancy and strength, adding that she'd met changes in the world with extraordinary grace and dedication. But perhaps the finest tribute to the Queen's 80th birthday was paid by her son, Prince Charles.
It gives me enormous pride to be able to congratulate her publicly in this way, and to thank her on behalf of us all for the many wonderful qualities which she has brought to almost an entire lifetime of service and dedication.
The Queen hoped that her family would secure the continuity of the Windsor dynasty, but the divorces of her children challenged the stability of the monarchy. Starting in 1973 with Princess Anne's marriage to Mark Phillips, all those spectacular weddings which had promised so much ended in failure and scandal. No one foresaw the problems that the introduction of Lady Diana Spencer in 1981 and Sarah Ferguson 5 years later would bring to the royal family. Diana's epic wars with Charles resulted in divorce and the loss of her royal title in 1997. But after her tragic death, she was given a funeral befitting the mother of a future king. In 2005, Charles married Camilla Parker Bowles in a private ceremony unseen by the world. 24 years earlier, he married Diana in the splendour of St. Paul's Cathedral. To the Queen, this wedding signified continuity and a new life for the monarchy.
I think the day that the Prince of Wales married Lady Diana Spencer was a great day for the Queen. What it was showing that day was that the continuity of her family was being continued in a correct and proper manner. I think there was always a certain amount of concern about Diana, who was really quite young for her years. I think she was happy and satisfied that her son was marrying somebody and they would produce children, and the continuity of the House of Windsor would almost certainly keep going.
Diana became pregnant soon after the wedding. Her problems and illnesses were concealed from the public at first. Shortly after these pictures, Diana threw herself down some stairs at Sandringham, the Queen's Norfolk estate.
The Queen must have known that there were all sorts of problems almost from the word go. So without us knowing, and she hid this very well, she was aware that Diana was having an incredibly difficult time settling down to married life.
Despite her love of formal and ceremonial events, the Queen is a woman of genuine emotion, often kept hidden from the public. The Archbishop of Canterbury has said that she was devastated by Diana's death. Afterwards, she had to accommodate Prince Charles's determination to marry the woman Diana had called the third person in her marriage. Camilla Parker Bowles was Charles's mistress for several years before the public became aware of her. Diana blamed her for the breakup of her marriage. A campaign to gain public acceptance for Camilla began with a staged appearance outside the London Ritz Hotel in 1999. The press eagerly followed each stage of the public relations exercise. A series of high-profile events for Charles's main charity, the Prince's Trust, propelled Camilla ever more into the public arena. But according to the law, Charles still had to ask the Queen's consent to marry.
Charles, of course, had to go and ask her. Surely the only 56-year-old man in this day and age who has to undergo such a humiliating and embarrassing experience to ask his mother for permission to marry.
Camilla's divorce made a Church of England wedding impossible. The couple opted for a civil service at Windsor's Town Hall on April the 9th, 2005. William and Harry were among the few witnesses. The Queen did not attend.
She was advised both by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Owen Williams, and also by her own private secretary, Sir Robin Janvrin, that it would be unwise and inappropriate to attend the civil wedding because she is, of course, the Supreme Governor of the Church of England.
A church blessing was held at St George's Chapel in Windsor Castle. Against expectations, Camilla had become a member of the royal family, but the Queen was still concerned about her impact on the monarchy.
I think what the Queen felt at the beginning was that the people wouldn't accept Camilla because of Camilla being the other woman in the marriage when Charles was in love, supposed to be in love with Diana. And the Queen was worried that her people, her subjects, wouldn't accept Camilla. What she does feel is that Camilla has been a wonderful influence on Prince Charles. And she truly loves Prince Charles, and so the Queen warms to Camilla by the day.
Since her marriage, Camilla's immaculate grooming and stylish wardrobe have played their part in gaining public acceptance. Now known as Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Cornwall, she's tactfully avoided using the title Princess of Wales, which is irrevocably associated with Diana. We're told she'll be the Princess Consort when Charles is king.
Queen has now come to the conclusion Camilla is winning over the people in a way that a year ago looked impossible, frankly, and that the monarchy, therefore, is in much safer hands than perhaps it was. She knows that there is strong opposition still to Camilla. That's why we go through the idea that Camilla will never be queen. But in 20 years' time, if that's when Prince Charles comes to the throne, who is then to say that Camilla shouldn't be his queen at his side?
Prince Andrew, a naval officer, married Sarah Ferguson in 1986. Again, there were high hopes for this marriage, but like Diana, the new Duchess of York disappointed the Queen.
Her backgrounds are so very different from hers. After all, she'd grown up with it. She'd been used to Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle as a child. She'd been trained for her job for forever. And so I don't think she fully understood the difficulties that these girls experienced. And I think when it came to the Duchess of York, particularly so, because for the Queen, her own naval days as a naval wife had been absolute joy to her. And the fact that Sarah Ferguson didn't, or the Duchess of York didn't seem to enjoy that aspect of her husband's life, she found very difficult to understand.
With hindsight, it was clear that Diana and Sarah found adapting to royal life more difficult than anyone had expected. But the Queen did try to help them.
If we look back, remember it was the Queen who called the editors to the palace in the early days when the Princess of Wales felt she was being pressurised by the press and the media. And the Queen said, my daughter-in-law's peace must be protected. And she, at that time, moved to protect the princess. Princess of Wales to her was like an adorable skittish niece. I mean, she just knew Diana from childhood. And so she was indulgent, caring, and a little bit bewildered sometimes. I mean, in the early days, when the princess was married, and they were at Balmoral, and it was a stuffy occasion, the princess would jump up from the table and run round the table and sit on Prince Charles's lap and give him a kiss. I mean, something like that had never been seen before amongst the royal family. The Queen would just shake her head and give a little smile.
The Queen attended the wedding of Princess Margaret's son Viscount Linley to heiress Serena Stanhope in 1993. Both David Linley and his sister Lady Sarah Armstrong-Jones were close to the Queen. Princess Margaret had married Lord Snowdon in 1960, but the marriage fell apart. The Snowdons divorced in 1978 after several hostile years. The Queen took the children under her wing.
She dotes on Princess Margaret's children, especially Lady Sarah, who is just a favourite niece, and she was a very sort of loving aunt figure and very proud of Lord Linley.
I think one of the Queen's courtiers said to me that sometimes those young children thought the Queen was their mother, because she would always take them up to Balmoral with her when Princess Margaret and Lord Snowdon would go on their summer holidays to Sardinia or to Tuscany. And she was very much a stable figure in their lives, and she loved them very much.
That stability of the Queen was needed when 3 of her 4 children divorced and her grandchildren had to cope with split homes. The Queen took a special interest in William, the second in line to the throne, and he developed a close relationship with his grandmother. But as their parents' marriage disintegrated, there were gaps in the young prince's contact with the rest of the family.
I think with William and Harry, she's got to know them far, far better in the last few years. I think when the marriage was still going on and Charles and Diana were at each other's throats, she hardly saw them at all. But obviously in the last 10 years, she's seen them grow up. And although she might not see them that much, I think she's very proud, especially of Prince William.
In 1992, both the Yorks and the Waleses separated after a series of scandals which shocked the Queen. Princess Anne also divorced in the same year and then remarried.
I know that when these divorces came one after another, she did say to a close friend, well, what have we done wrong? It is very difficult to be the Queen and a mother. I think every important executive woman finds this. I think that the Windsor temperament, which has been handed down from King George V and Queen Mary, has also been a factor. The stiff upper lip, the sweeping problems under the carpet, and the lack of communication. And this also comes from living in enormous houses like Buckingham Palace, where they live quite separate lives, each with their own suite and their own servants. And so it isn't that you have a jolly get-together in front of the television. It's a different life.
And then, on November the 20th, 1992, Windsor Castle caught fire. It happened on the Queen's 45th wedding anniversary. The Queen was upset at the damage to her favourite home. She supervised the removal of family treasures, and days later, she spoke of her sadness.
1992 is not a year on which I shall look back with undiluted pleasure. In the words of one of my more sympathetic correspondents, it has turned out to be an annus horribilis. I suspect that I'm not alone in thinking it so.
Couldn't have been worse, could it? All the children's marriages going wrong one after another, the tremendous scandals in the papers, the constant attention to the royal family's private lives, and then the outspoken criticism of her, which she wasn't used to. She'd been used to nothing but kindness all her life. And when the public turned on her at the time of the Windsor fire and said, no, we won't pay, I think she was deeply hurt and surprised by this.
The world mourned the loss of Diana, but the Queen's slow public reaction provoked criticism.
Of course the Queen was shocked when Diana died, as was everybody else. But her concern wasn't actually for Diana or her family or Prince Charles. It was for her grandchildren. And William and Harry were up at Balmoral, staying with the Queen in Scotland, and her whole concentration was on protecting and safeguarding those poor young children as best she could.
At Balmoral, the Queen learned of the growing tension in the capital. The tension focused on the empty flagpole on top of Buckingham Palace.
She then gave orders for a flag to be put up, never happened before, and that it should fly at half-mast. I think she was out of touch. I think it was mainly because she was trying to protect the grandchildren, and I think she very nearly got it seriously wrong.
William and Harry walked behind their mother's coffin, with their grandfather to support them on their heartbreaking journey.
Prince William asked his grandfather to walk in the funeral procession. It was Prince William's request. And I think that Prince William is probably the sort of son Prince Philip would like to have had. I think he's very proud of him. And he likes Prince Harry's robustness. And I think he's very devoted to them in his way. The death of Diana will have a lasting impact. I think it probably will be looked at in the history books as the time when the monarchy radically changed its attitude to its past and its future.
Entertaining heads of state is one of the Queen's most important duties. This ceremonial hospitality builds bridges between countries and cements international friendships. The grandeur of a state banquet at Windsor Castle is the highlight of this visit. 150 guests dine from the finest china, silverware and crystal. 300 staff serve them quail's eggs, turbot, veal and peaches. For many guests in white tie and tiaras, this is a unique experience, but it's the Queen's 65th state banquet.
I raise my glass to you and Mrs. Wałęsa and to the well-being and happiness of the Polish people.
International diplomacy requires visits abroad, like this one to France in 1992. Since her coronation, the Queen's travelled over 1 million miles, made over 250 foreign visits to 128 countries, and still plans more. The Queen's reliability and grasp of foreign affairs are never in doubt. Her professionalism was evident on this tour of Germany in 1992. It was her first visit there since the fall of communism and the unification of West and East Germany. She came to support the newly united republic and to strengthen ties between Germany and Britain, which had been disrupted by 2 world wars. Her speech put aside old enmity.
Like all close friends, we do not always see eye to eye. But as friends should, we try not to let the sun go down on our quarrels.
Visiting the United States reinforces the special relationship it's enjoyed with Britain since before World War II. In 1991, the Queen was welcomed by President George Bush Sr.
There is a symbolism in the events of such a visit that defies analysis, but which has a way of reaching the hearts of people far and wide.
A visit to Australia is different. She's head of state there, and she's made 15 visits since becoming Queen. She went in 1992, after a gap of 12 years, to a country where republicanism was a growing movement, but her personal popularity ensured that she's still Queen there today. During the trip, she unveiled one of the many portraits of her reign. This one captures the reserved character of the woman behind the crown.
The Queen isn't, by nature, an emotional person. She doesn't have great highs and great lows. She accepts life, and if there's something she doesn't want to understand or doesn't want to see, she compartmentalizes it. So she avoids emotional confrontation. She avoids moral confrontation altogether.
The elder daughter of the Duke and Duchess of York, Elizabeth had a golden childhood. With her sister Margaret, her life was carefree until her parents became King and Queen in 1936, when she was 10. They became the family firm, or We Four, as her father King George VI called them. Now heiress presumptive, Elizabeth was influenced by her formidable grandmother, Queen Mary.
She didn't inherit her own mother's warmth and spontaneity, and the person she admires almost most, apart from Queen Victoria, is her grandmother, Queen Mary. And you can see a great resemblance between the two. You know, that shyness, that formality, that slight distance from the public.
At 21, she became engaged to Prince Philip of Greece, despite the reservations of her father.
There were some family tensions, mainly because the king, King George VI, the Queen's father, of course, Princess Elizabeth's father, didn't feel that Philip Mountbatten at that time was a suitable prospective husband. He just didn't feel so. He didn't come out of the top drawer of European royalty. The Greek royal family were fairly low down in the league table of European royalty. He didn't have a great title. He didn't have a vast fortune or estates to bring into the marriage. And also he felt at 21 was a bit young. He thought she should have waited 4 or 5 years, but she showed that she had some steel in her. And indeed, she persuaded her mother, and her mother supported her. And of course, the late Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, had a huge influence over her husband, and that's what happened.
In 1947, during a family tour of South Africa, Elizabeth made her 21st birthday speech.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. But I shall not have strength to carry out this resolution alone, unless you join in it with me, as I now invite you to do. I know that your support will be unfailingly given. God help me to make good my vow, and God bless all of you who are willing to share in it.
Nearly 50 years later, she returned to a country where great changes had taken place. South Africa had withdrawn from the Commonwealth in 1961 over its policy of apartheid. This ended in 1994, and South Africa was readmitted to the Commonwealth. On this visit in 1995, the Queen met a statesman who's become a personal friend, President Nelson Mandela. In 1996, Mandela came to London to visit the woman he calls my friend Elizabeth.
The Queen isn't racially prejudiced at all. She's colourblind, if you like, and one of her greatest friends, and the person who impressed her and the other members of the royal household, if you like, was Nelson Mandela. And when she met Mandela, she was tremendously impressed with his sincerity and with his integrity and with his compassion. And I think the fact that he felt all this endeared him to the Queen, and indeed they are still very much in touch. They correspond with each other, if not regularly, but certainly quite frequently.
An English princess marrying her handsome sailor prince meant an occasion for national rejoicing. Britain was still burdened in 1947 with ration books and clothing coupons, and they welcomed this glittering relief from post-war austerity. Heiress to the kingdom since the age of 10, Elizabeth was the nation's sweetheart. Her wedding brought romance and promise to a country still adjusting to life after a world war. Elizabeth's lavishly embroidered silk wedding gown was designed by the royal couturier Norman Hartnell. It was beyond the dreams of any other bride at the time. Although the king found the parting from his daughter painful, it was a day of family pride, shared by his subjects.
It was a very, very depressing time, and Churchill described the wedding as a bright ray of colour on the hard grey road we have to travel.
Despite the November weather, the happy couple travelled in an open carriage to Waterloo Station for the journey to their honeymoon. They were accompanied by the bride's favourite corgi, Susan. Elizabeth had married the man she'd loved, unknown to the public, since her early teens.
The Queen was 13 when she first saw Prince Philip, who was then a young naval cadet at Dartmouth, and very good looking. You know, every sort of schoolgirl's idea of a dashing hero, blonde, lithe, very sort of athletic. They then met some years later, and of course was so different then. A courtship was conducted perhaps at a distance, but the Queen had met the man she loved, and I would think has never stopped loving.
The couple spent the early part of their marriage on the island of Malta, where Philip was stationed at the naval base.
For Princess Elizabeth, it was like flying out of a cage. After all, she'd been brought up during the war at Windsor Castle, very much isolated. And there in Malta, she just lived the life of any naval wife, going to dances, going to parties, going to beach parties, just living a totally normal life. And it was perhaps the happiest period of her life.
The birth of a son, Charles, a year after the wedding, brought further happiness and secured the Windsor dynasty for another generation. Letters sent by the doting mother showed maternal warmth and parental pride. Baby Charles brought great joy to both his young parents. In 1950, Charles was joined by his sister, Anne, but Elizabeth soon had to deputise for her ailing father.
She was on a state visit, going to visit Australia and New Zealand, when she stopped off in Kenya, and it was there that she heard that her father died.
Her coronation on June the 2nd, 1953, was an occasion of great pageantry and splendour. Charles, aged 4, and Anne, 2, watched as their parents left the palace in the gold coach. Afterwards, they joined their newly crowned mother and watched the cheering crowds from the palace balcony. On that historic day, the world heralded a new Elizabethan age.
People were optimistic in the way that they thought, this is going to be a new Britain with a young queen. And then on the day of the coronation came the news that Hillary and Tenzing had conquered Everest, and this was another terrific morale booster.
The Queen's duties took her away from her young children. Charles grew close to his grandmother as a result. He seemed rather bemused by the protocol. Sometimes he and Anne joined their parents at the end of foreign tours, such as here in Gibraltar in 1954. They hadn't seen their mother for 6 months.
We have to remember that Prince Charles and Princess Anne were born before she came to the throne, when she was still just the heir to the throne, and so she had more time, she had a more private life. As soon as she acceded to the throne, she had so much to do, so much to learn, huge Commonwealth tours to do, which in those days, before jet planes had really caught on, took months.
The person who's given the Queen the greatest public support is Prince Philip, but in their family life, she's chosen to defer to him. Arguably, this has had an unfortunate consequence for Charles, who was sent to Philip's old school, Gordonston.
He is very much a boss in the home. He was the one who decided that the boys should go to Gordonston, whereas the Queen herself might have preferred Eton.
She took her eye off her son. I think that she listened to her husband and said, look, I think it's a good idea if he goes away to a boarding school. And I'm not sure in retrospect that that was such a good idea, but then we'll never really know how Prince Charles would have turned out if he'd been to a sort of day school or had governors. It's very, very hard to tell. But I think Philip was very harsh on Prince Charles.
We know that this has not been an immense success, and poor Prince Charles was deeply unhappy there. But I think the Queen felt particularly that in her marriage it should be a traditional marriage of her time, in which the husband called the shots and the women ran the house. And also I feel that she had to compensate, felt that she had to compensate for the fact that she was, in essence, the boss, and this dominant male, macho man, that the Duke of Edinburgh had to take second place in public anyway.
A second family followed after a 10-year interval. Andrew was born in 1960, Edward in 1964. After a long marriage, the royal couple remained close.
The Queen will call Prince Philip darling, but if she's in public or she's cross with him, she'll call him Philip. And one knows then that things are a little glacial. And the Queen is not the sort of person to lose her temper. I think if there's a blistering row about something, she will probably go out and ride her horses or go and feed the dogs or groom the corgis, and he may stomp about a bit. But the Queen, her voice is not raised loudly, but everyone is aware if she is displeased and not amused.
In 1977, the Queen celebrated her Silver Jubilee. She travelled to St Paul's Cathedral in the 200-year-old gold state coach. Her grandparents, King George V and Queen Mary, celebrated their Silver Jubilee in 1935, riding in the same coach. The Queen's processional route was lined with cheering crowds all the way from Buckingham Palace to St Paul's Cathedral to London's Guildhall, where she had lunch, and back to the palace. She'd not expected the warmth of the public's response. Amazed at the spontaneous bursts of cheering outside St Paul's Cathedral, the Queen made an impromptu walkabout, the first of her reign.
She comes from an era when it was not done for those people to be demonstrative in public. And sometimes she said after a day of meeting people, you know, I simply ache with smiling, but as confided, it's a sad thing. She doesn't have a smiley face. But where she was actually very touched and very natural was the time of the Silver Jubilee, going through the streets, and the people came out once again and shook her warmly by the hand, and she was astonished by this. I think she gets a lot of her shyness from Queen Mary, the same sort of uprightness and inability, and yet so caring.
On this memorable day, over 100,000 people waited to cheer her outside the palace. 5 years earlier, the Queen and Prince Philip celebrated their silver wedding. Playing on the famous royal use of the pronoun we, she included a subtle joke in her speech.
We, and by that I mean both of us, are most grateful.
A 21-gun salute marked Prince Philip's 70th birthday in 1991. 5 years older than the Queen, Philip's retained his energy and his enthusiasm for the monarchy. He's Prince Consort in everything but name. The royal couple have weathered many storms and clearly still enjoy each other's company. At Balmoral, their home in Scotland, they can relax with their family and their favourite pets. This is the granddaughter of Susan, the corgi the Queen took with her on her honeymoon. And this is the breed most associated with her. She likes to feed them herself.
The Queen is in the palace. She does give them afternoon tea herself. I mean, she chops up their food and their biscuits and puts it down in little silver salvers. And some of them are quite snappy and are not averse to biting an ankle. And I sometimes think that gives her a very secret chuckle.
After lunch at Windsor, and this is quite disconcerting for guests, the Queen will spray dog biscuits around under the table. The footman appears with a salver, and on one occasion, the salver of dog biscuits was presented to the Queen, and a nervous bishop who was sitting beside her actually took one and ate it.
Prince Philip took up carriage driving when he was forced to give up the very physical sport of polo at the age of 60. For a horseman of long experience, carriage driving offered a way of prolonging his participation in equestrian events. He also enjoys the company of others who are equally keen on this test of skill and control. And just as he supports the Queen in her official role, she likes to show her encouragement for her husband's unusual hobby. She always makes time to watch him when he competes at carriage driving trials. Horses can be disturbed by noisy and intrusive spectators, which puts the drivers at risk. Sometimes she lets her feelings be known, shooing off unwelcome attention. Few dare argue with the Queen. She's a renowned horsewoman herself with legendary control. She rides frequently at Windsor, sometimes with Prince Edward, the only one of her children who's not been divorced. She's notably relaxed with her youngest son, and riding gives them the chance to talk away from the pressures of palace life. The Queen's passionate about racing. She owns Ascot Racecourse near Windsor and attends Royal Ascot there each June. The parade of open carriages before the start of the races was as much part of the attraction in the 1960s as it was in more recent times. But the Duchess of York, Princesses Anne and Margaret, and of course the Princess of Wales, didn't share the Queen's boundless enthusiasm for watching her horses.
You can see the sort of absolute girlish glee with which she treats them. A win, she'll run down, to get a better view, and, her face lights up as you never see it light up on public occasions.
She shared her love of horses with her racing manager, Lord Carnarvon. They'd been friends since their teens, and his death from a heart attack on 9/11, the day of the terrorist attacks in America, was a bitter blow.
The Queen had a wonderful relationship with Lord Carnarvon. He was her racing manager, and racing is one thing that the Queen loves above all else. And she's extremely, extremely intelligent about breeding. And here was one man that she could talk to her heart's content and never be bored. Now, even if he called in the middle of dinner, I'm not saying a state banquet, but if it was a family dinner, she would always take his call. So she misses him a great deal.
The Queen owns racehorses and brood mares worth over £3.5 million. When President Reagan visited Windsor in 1982, they went riding together. The Queen was keen to show off her horses to the one-time Hollywood actor and owner of a Californian ranch. He happily posed for the cameras before being led back by the Queen into the fabled splendour of Windsor Castle. Professional rich list compilers have cautiously estimated the Queen's personal fortune at £300 million.
It's terribly hard to work out just how rich the Queen is. It's very hard to separate the goods, chattels, which are very valuable ones, that she is custodian of for her life.
The crown worn at the opening of Parliament is state property, but the Queen has fabulous jewels, magnificent homes, a huge investment portfolio, and paintings and drawings which are the envy of the art world.
Her art collection is just astonishing. There are so many Van Dycks around, there are Michelangelos. I mean, absolutely endless goodies, but I'm not sure that she could classify them as being hers.
Windsor Castle is her favourite home, but officially it too belongs to the state. Despite her lavish surroundings, the Queen's well known for her frugal habits.
You will still find the Queen perhaps with a small electric fire. I think it may run to 3 bars, but and very often she'll put on 2. But she likes to be thrifty.
The Duchy of Lancaster is the ancient custodian of 50,000 acres, including farmland, historic buildings, urban developments, and other assets held in trust for the monarch. The Duchy pays an annual private income to the Queen of around £8 million. This is separate from the civil list awarded by Parliament to cover her official expenses as head of state and head of the Commonwealth. She pays regular visits to the Duchy and keeps in touch with her many tenants this way. Here, as everywhere else she visits, the Queen's clothes and grooming reflect her position rather than her wealth.
She has a very matter-of-fact attitude to clothes. She has always said, I'm not a film star, The clothes, you know, are just essential to the job. And she has very strict rules. She will say to designers who will draw up some beautiful thing for a tour, and she'll say, hopeless for waving. I can't wave with sleeves like that. So they must always ensure that she can wave. Hats must always be off the face because the people must be able to see me. And lipstick is always a very strong red, and this is for the sake of the photographers, and so that she can be seen by people from a great distance. But she doesn't have a frivolous attitude to clothes, though she does like pretty, bright colours. She likes lemons, pinks, blues, purples, although she looks very good, actually, in dark colours. Her hair is immovable, probably, in whatever the weather conditions. And I once said to her hairdresser, what is the secret of the Queen's hair? You know, why does it never move in the wind? And he said, brute force and lacquer.
The Queen has welcomed over 90 world leaders to Britain. Each is treated with equal courtesy, that of one head of state to another. And whatever government's in power, it's the Queen who acts as the nation's host. Her unique position above the changing political scenes in Britain and abroad enables her to provide a degree of diplomatic hospitality respected throughout the world. Elizabeth is Queen in 16 countries, as well as being head of the Commonwealth, a free association of 53 countries. About a third of her visits abroad have been to Commonwealth countries, starting in 1953, the year of her coronation. These tours foster international cooperation and trade links between member countries. She's known many Commonwealth Prime Ministers, all as important to her as her 10 British ones, from Winston Churchill to Tony Blair.
A lot of people don't appreciate this. They consider the Commonwealth as really very unimportant, a relic from the past. It's not how the Queen views it at all. She considers her role as Queen of Australia, New Zealand, Canada, any of the other 16 Dominion countries. She considers that every bit as important as being Queen of Britain, UK, Northern Ireland, Wales, all that. Every bit as important. And she loves her prime ministers.
The Commonwealth love her. They think that she's the person who cares about them, that the government of the day in Britain usually doesn't. And also she's been around so long that she's such friends with all these leaders. She knows their problems, she knows their families, she knows intimate details about them. I mean, you know, whether their brothers just died or something. So they really feel that she genuinely cares, and she does.
She speaks privately to every one at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meetings. Although royal tours are immensely well prepared, gaffes can still happen. When she made a speech at the White House in 1991, the stand was arranged for a taller figure than the Queen.
Some nitwit had got the stand from where she was reading her speech a little bit too high, and the camera was too low, and you just had a picture up over the lectern you couldn't see the Queen's face properly, all you could see was a hat, and everybody dubbed it as the speaking hat. She finds this actually immensely amusing. She has a great sense of humour.
Well, the Queen's friends will tell you what a wonderful sense of humour she has, and how she likes to laugh at herself, for a start. And she loves ridiculous things. I mean, she'll laugh till the tears run down her face. And then she's got a quick wit, a sense of irony. I mean, there's a story I particularly like. And she was in a Norfolk shop, dressed as she normally is in the country with her headscarf and everything. And a woman came up to her and said, I hope you don't mind my saying so, but you look awfully like the Queen. And the Queen said, how very reassuring.
A fountain in Kensington Gardens is Britain's memorial to Diana. It was opened by the Queen in 2004.
The Diana who made such an impact on our lives. Of course, there were difficult times, but memories mellow with the passing of the years. I remember especially the happiness she gave to my 2 grandsons.
William has learned a great deal from the Queen.
When William first started at Eton, every Sunday afternoon he was taken up to have tea with Granny at Windsor Castle, when he was given a few off-the-cuff lessons in constitutional history. Not the ideal way for a 13 and 14-year-old to spend a Sunday afternoon, I would have thought, but he did, and he absolutely worships his grandmother. They have a wonderful time.
And the Queen does not forget the far-flung countries of the Commonwealth. In the spring of 2006, she returned to Australia. She visited Canberra, Sydney and Melbourne, where she opened the Commonwealth Games. Prince Philip accompanied her. There was a busy programme each day and walkabouts to meet the people. The Queen first visited Australia during the Commonwealth tour the year after her coronation, and she still fondly remembers that first visit.
The first time I came here on a glorious summer's day, 52 years ago, there was, of course, no opera house. The city was smaller, the skyline more modest.
The strain was beginning to show after the Queen's 14 engagements, 2 speeches and several walkabouts.
It must be extremely tough for them. I mean, she travels with Prince Philip, who's 85. I mean, how long they can carry on doing these long, long flights, and then a week or so of duties often in hot, dusty conditions is anyone's guess. I can't imagine she'll be doing this when she's 90, but I think she'll carry on for a few more years.
On April the 21st, 2006, the Queen celebrated her 80th birthday. She emerged from Windsor Castle with her husband to receive congratulations. Long past normal retirement age, she'll still keep the vow she made at her coronation.
In 1953, she took an oath. She was anointed with holy oil. She took an oath to serve as monarch for the rest of her life, and indeed she will do. And there are many people who believe that the best hope for the continued stability and popularity of the monarchy is if the Queen has inherited the longevity genes of her mother and lives and reigns for another 20 years.
You can only imagine the Queen standing aside if she's impaired by illness, some kind of mental illness or such a physical illness that deems her incapable of doing her duties as head of state. I think she will and is reducing the number of her commitments she does, and Charles is stepping up and doing more. But she does not believe in abdication. To her, abdication is a dirty word.
The coronation was an overwhelming experience for the 4-year-old Charles. Anne was too young, but Charles was allowed to watch the ceremony. He grew up in awe of a mother who was also Queen. They may not always see eye to eye, but Charles publicly praised her on her 80th birthday.
It gives me enormous pride to be able to congratulate her publicly in this way, and to thank her on behalf of us all for the many wonderful qualities which she has brought to almost an entire lifetime of service and dedication to her country, to her family, to the realms, and to the countries of the Commonwealth. For very nearly 60 of those 80 years, she has been my darling mamma. And my sentiments today are those of a proud and loving son who hopes that you will join with me in wishing the Queen the happiest of happy birthdays, together with the fervent prayer that there will be countless memorable returns of the day.
The scandals that rocked the royal family are largely overcome. On her birthday, Elizabeth had been Queen for 54 years. Her reign has seen great changes, and she has successfully taken the British monarchy into the 21st century.